conversation we're going to have starts with C. It's the considerations. Demographic, relational considerations that you want to consider as it relates to getting married. And really what these considerations are is they're conversation starters for you. They're ways that you can begin to talk about your relationship really from the beautiful journey of first meeting one another and how you met and the excitement around your relationship, all the way to starting to really begin to look back at who you were growing up as a child and your parents' relationships and how you're bringing those dynamics into your marital relationship right now. And so one of the reasons I get so excited about this is because of happily married couples. I want you to think about this. Happily married couples, according to research, live longer, they live healthier lives, and they make more money. So happily married couples live longer, they live healthier lives, and they make more money. We want you, my desire for you is to live happily married, that you have high marital satisfaction. And a lot of what we're going to cover is going to lead to high marital satisfaction if you apply what we're talking about throughout this course. And so I want you to write down, I asked you to come into this session with that one discovery, that one insight that you wanted to learn, and I hope you guys were able to talk about that. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to write down a few things. This is going to be an interactive session. We're going to really interact together on this one, and I want you to just write down some things, and some of them are going to feel like, oh, this is kind of weird, but as you write them down, you can take and you'll write them down a column. And I think what's really fascinating about this is when you start to see these things on paper, it's very different. You start to see things differently. So that's why I want you to write it down. So I want you to start by writing down each of your ages. Write down your age. And again, part of this is really interesting when you look at it, because my wife is 4.5 years younger than me. And there's so many different things that we see just in a 4.5 year difference. As it relates to how we grew up listening to music, as it relates to how the movies we watched, the culture that we experienced in just 4.5 years. And so even your age, I know it seems silly, but there's a lot of differences and a lot of similarities you might have, and just idiosyncrasies and quirks just as it relates to age. So write down your age. Next, what I would love for you to do is write down how many more months until your wedding day. Have you picked your wedding day? And if you have, how many more months or years is it until your wedding day? So what is that length of time? And then write down, how long have you known your partner? How long have you guys been together? So the months and the years that you have been together, and maybe even known one another. It might be two different categories. Also, what you want to consider is your employment. What are your jobs? What do you currently do right now? Whether it's an occupation, are you full-time? Are you part-time? Are you unemployed? And then what is your occupation? What are you currently doing? And it might be school. You might be in school, so you might be a student. So you might want to write that down. And then write down your education, your highest level of education. So in other words, if you've had a bachelor's degree, great, put a bachelor's degree. If it's a high school diploma, put a high school diploma. Maybe you've gotten a graduate degree, put graduate degree. And the reason we talk about that is because there's dynamics about how educated people are and the way that they relate to one another. What I'd love for you to do is write down your yearly income. So each of you write down your yearly income. And again, we're going to talk about money later on. It's going to be one of the conversations that we have. And money is going to be an important conversation to have before you get married. So write down your yearly income, and so that you can begin to talk about how much money you're making. Where can we afford to live? What are our ideals as it relates to living in a house or renting or owning cars, and how much debt we have? And we'll get into some of that. But for now, at least you have an idea of your yearly income. Another conversation to have is your religious affiliation. Do you have a religious affiliation? And if so, what is that affiliation? So each of you write that down. And again, we'll have a separate conversation about this a little bit later on, but at least for now, just write it down. Put it in your column as you're considering all of these conversations that we need to have a little bit later on. I'd love for you to write that one down. Write down also your ethnic background. These are really important because if you grew up in a different culture or from a different ethnic background, those are also conversations that you'll need to have about how you step into the culture of the other person. Also, I want you to write down your living arrangement. What's your current living arrangement? And then I want you to write down also not just your living arrangement, but also consider your beliefs about your living arrangement. The reason this is important is because there's so many times in sessions where I have met with a couple and one of them has a different belief than the other about the living arrangement, but they haven't talked about it. They haven't talked about whether or not they're going to live together before marriage, whether or not they already are, and they don't, and one of them maybe doesn't want to be. But again, as we talk about these conversations, we have to bring them to light. We have to bring the expectations to light, because how we learn how to communicate and fight for one another is a really important dynamic. So take a look at that. Also, I want you to take a look also at your previous marital relationship. So you might be entering into this course. This might be your second marriage. It might be your third marriage. And I just want to honor you and say, wow, like this is awesome that you're taking the time to enter into, I want to make sure that I get this right. And just honor that journey that you've been on, because I know that is not an easy road. As you write that down, I want you to also write down your parents' marital status. Were your parents happily married for many years, or were they also divorced? So write that down, because how you come into the relationship, there's conversation around that that'll be really important to have. Also, what was your birth order? What was your birth order? Are you a firstborn? Are you a middle child? Are you, the baby? Are you an only child? Again, because what you'll start to see is will highlight a lot of the dynamics that you carry into your marriage come from birth position. Again, another conversation you want to have. And then one of the biggest ones, and we'll get into this deeper in a little while, how many children do you want? How many children do you want? And really, this is the question that should preface it. Do you want children? This is a make or break for a lot of couples. And so if you haven't talked about it already, I would just really encourage you to write that down as well. Do you want children, and how many? I also want you to consider the number of children that you grew up with in your family. So did you come from a big family? Maybe you grew up in a medium-sized family, maybe 3, 4 kids or whatever. Or maybe you grew up as an only child. How many children did you have in your family? And as you do that, what I would love for you to also consider in this conversation here is, how long do you want to wait before you choose to have children? I think this is another conversation that's important, because I've seen so many times where one partner is hoping to have children right away and the other one wants to wait a while, maybe because of a job or finish education or that type of thing. So you want to consider, how long do we want to wait before we even have children? Another important conversation to have is thinking through, and I want you to list this, what were your parents' reaction to your marriage, or your parents' reaction to your engagement, that you're going to get married? Were they excited? Were they bummed? Were they indifferent, apathetic? Just find one word: happy, excited, apathetic, indifferent, disappointed. What's a word that would describe how your parents reacted to you getting married? And then what's one word that would describe the way your friends reacted to you getting married? These are really important conversations to have, because our friends and our parents really are the people who know us best. And if they have a weird reaction, something we might want to pay attention to in relation to how we're navigating the relationship. And it could very well be that it's something that is on them more than it is us, but it's something to pay attention to, because your friends and your parents will be people that you live and do life with and navigate life with. And so you'll want to have these conversations with one another before moving forward. And as you do, one of the other things we're going to consider is family of origin dynamics, relational dynamics, maybe if there was abuse in your past, those types of things. And you want to look at those dynamics. And just, we're going to have a conversation about that next in our next session on the genogram and doing a genogram. A genogram is basically like a family tree, except what you're doing is, instead of looking at your family tree, you're looking at patterns. You're looking at relational patterns and relational dynamics that happened. And what it really does is it gives us insight into our family of origin. and maybe insight that we didn't even have any idea about. And we'll talk more about that in our next session. But as we close this session out, I want you to walk through all of the things that we just wrote down and considered. And your parents' reaction, your friend's reaction, your age, and all of these things that you can begin to consider and talk about. We're going to go deeper with some of those issues as we get more into this. Here's what I would love for you to think about. I would love for you to think about, what do you envision for a happy, enjoyable marriage? What do you envision for a happy, enjoyable marriage? What are the similarities that unite you? What are the ways that you see, maybe even some of these considerations we've already looked at? What are some of the ways that you can take the differences that you have? Maybe it's an age gap difference. Maybe it's that one of you came from a big family and one of you came from a really small family. Maybe it's one of you grew up in a city and the other one grew up in a country town. And I didn't even give you that one, but write that one down. Where did you grow up? Was it a big city? Was it a rural area? And how can you bring those differences together to champion the heart of one another? Because that's what this is all about. We are going to learn a successful marriage is about fighting for one another, not necessarily fighting with one another. How can you do that in a deep and powerful way is what we're going to get into. But as we do, we want to make sure that we become aware. We're starting our entire journey, our entire course off by going hindsight, by looking backwards, by looking at what can we bring in from our past into our relationship with all of these demographic list, if you will, that I just gave you, so that you can begin to talk through who you are as a couple. And then as you close this session, here's what I'd love for you to do. I would love for you to be able to share once again your story of how you met with one another from the first time you knew she's the one, he's the one. I want you to look at one another in the eye, tell that story to one another once again, because going down memory lane is always a beautiful way to reunite together as we keep journeying and knowing that we're fighting for one another and not with one another.